9. That is the whole order. In the year 1119, on the rubble-choked streets of a city still scarred by the First Crusade, 9 men knelt in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They were not mystics. They were not treasure hunters. They were battle-worn knights who had seen what happened to pilgrims on the road from the coast to Jerusalem. The ambushes, the stripped bodies, the flies. They made a vow, and the King of Jerusalem gave them quarters on the Temple Mount, in the ruins of what people said was Solomon's Temple. 9 men, 1 vow, no money, no land. That is how the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon began. If you have ever seen a video game cover with a white-mantled knight holding a glowing relic, or a movie poster with hooded figures guarding a secret beneath a castle, you have met the legend. The legend is clean. The legend is mystical. The legend has a red cross on its chest and never seems to worry about the mud, the debt, or the smell of a medieval camp at dawn. The real story smells like horse sweat and old iron. It begins with 9 exhausted men in a ruined city, and it ends with fire, betrayal, and a king who needed money more than he needed justice. Somewhere between those 2 moments, this tiny brotherhood of protectors transformed into something the world had never seen. An international military and financial network that kings themselves would borrow from. And then it was destroyed in a single coordinated dawn. The Pope approved it. The king engineered it, and the Grand Master who watched his order burn has haunted Europe's memory ever since. Because here is the part the movies never show you. The Templars did not fall because they were evil. They did not fall because they possessed some forbidden secret. They fell because they became too useful, too wealthy, and too silent for their own good. The man who destroyed them owed them a fortune he could never repay. And the only way out of that debt was to erase the creditor. That is the loop we are chasing today. How did 9 poor knights build an empire that terrified the most powerful king in Europe? And how did that same king bring it all down in a matter of days? You think you know the Templars. White cloaks, righteous crusaders, keepers of the Holy Grail. That image is polished armor over a very different kind of machine. By the time their name meant power, the average Templar was less a mystic and more a combination of soldier, banker, and border guard. They ran fortified compounds called preceptories, basically walled headquarters that functioned as banks, barracks, and supply depots all at once. They moved gold across borders without moving a single coin, using letters of credit that would not look out of place in a modern bank. Hold on. Let me reframe what you think you know, because the gap between the myth and the machine is the entire story. If you have ever sat in a history class wondering why nobody teaches you about the organizations that actually ran the medieval world, the ones behind the kings, the ones holding the debt, you are about to see the original blueprint. The Templars did not stumble into power. They engineered it, 1 oath at a time, 1 charter at a time, 1 stone fortress at a time. Here is the contradiction at the heart of everything. The order was founded to protect unarmed pilgrims on a dangerous road. Pilgrims, not treasure. Protection, not conquest. The earliest Templars were essentially armed escorts for people who had traveled months across Europe to pray at a holy site. That is humble work. That is dangerous, exhausting, thankless work. And it is a very long way from banking the wealth of nations. That contradiction should hit you like a trebuchet stone. Humble armed escorts on a holy road turned into a financial machine no king could ignore. If you want to keep seeing history's real machinery get dismantled, subscribe now, because the secret rise is the part textbooks never touch. Type oath in the comments if you caught the moment that promise started turning into power. So how did the escorts become the empire? That is the secret rise. And it starts with a single word that mattered more than any sword in the medieval world: trust. When a pilgrim handed his valuables to a Templar for safekeeping during the journey, he was not just storing gold. He was placing his life and his family's fortune into the hands of a man bound by an oath. The Templars kept their oaths. That reputation became their greatest weapon and, eventually, the rope around their necks. The order grew slowly at first. The Council of Troyes, in 1129, officially recognized them as a military religious order within the church. That recognition was the key that unlocked the floodgates. Land came next, then castles, then the privileges, the papal exemptions that freed the Templars from local taxes and local laws. They answered to the Pope, and only to the Pope. If you were a king in medieval Europe, that was the moment a chill ran down your spine. Here was an army inside your borders that did not answer to you. Watch what happens next, because this is where the modern world's shadow starts falling backward onto the Middle Ages. The Templars began holding treasure for pilgrims and for kings. A pilgrim going to Jerusalem did not want to carry a heavy purse across bandit country. Deposit your gold at a preceptory in Paris, get a letter of credit, and collect the equivalent in Jerusalem. No coins crossed the Mediterranean. The Templar network was the clearinghouse. And once they held the gold, they started lending it. The same men who wore chainmail into battle sat behind heavy wooden desks reviewing loan terms. They charged interest, even though the church frowned on usury. They got creative with the paperwork, structuring loans so the interest was buried in penalties or exchange rates. It worked. Kings, nobles, and bishops all became customers. And when a king borrows from the same order that fields its own army, he has made a very powerful enemy, who also happens to hold his sword and his future. But it gets worse. The Templars did not just lend money, they took custody of the most valuable things a person could own short of land. Relics, legal documents, crown jewels. A preceptory was a fortress with a bank vault hidden inside it. And the secrecy around those vaults, the strict internal discipline, the refusal to explain their business to outsiders, that secrecy is what made them terrifying. When a powerful institution goes quiet about its workings, people start inventing what happens behind the walls. Now, step back and look at the scale of what they built. At their height, the order numbered in the tens of thousands, hundreds of fortifications stretched from the Holy Land across the Mediterranean to France, England, and the Iberian Peninsula. They owned vineyards, mills, farms, and entire districts of major cities. Their fleets carried soldiers, pilgrims, and cargo across the sea. This was not a religious order that happened to fight. This was a transnational corporation with its own military, its own logistics, its own intelligence network, and a rule book that demanded absolute obedience. You can still see echoes of that model today. The fortress with the bank inside, the logistics company that can move supplies anywhere on Earth, the institutional secrecy that makes outsiders nervous. It is not a coincidence. The Templars invented the template, and the people who ran the medieval world were just beginning to understand what they had let grow in their own backyard. There is a quiet moment the histories never dramatize. Picture a French accountant in some dusty counting house, unrolling a parchment that lists the King of France's debts. Every entry traces back to the same order of warrior monks. The crown owned land the Templars wanted. The crown owed money the Templars expected repaid. And the King of France, a man named Philip, had built his entire rule on the idea that God had chosen him to be above all earthly constraints. Being reminded of his debts by an army of monks who answered only to the Pope was not an inconvenience. It was an insult. That insult is the hinge of the whole story. Not a battle, but a balance sheet in a dusty counting house. If you want to keep following the money through the medieval world, subscribe and stay with us, because what Philip does next is the reason we still tell this story 700 years later. Then leave a comment with the word debt if you think a king's wounded pride is what truly brought the Templars down. If you have ever owed money to someone who also happened to be more powerful than you already understand the emotional mechanics of the 14th century. Philip the Fair called that for his good looks, not his temper, was a king who believed royal authority was absolute. And here was a network of monks who had grown rich enough to make him look small. The textbooks will tell you the Templars fell because of heresy. The deeper truth is that they fell because a powerful man decided they were a problem he could make disappear. The rumor mill did the rest. Whispers traveled from tavern to court. Secret initiations, spitting on the cross, worshipping an idol called Baphomet. Were these stories true? The confessions that emerged later came from men under torture, which should make any thinking person suspicious. But the smoke was exactly what Philip needed. Public opinion turned. The order that had once protected pilgrims became, in the popular imagination, an infestation of heretics hiding behind wealth and privilege. The pivot had come. Here is where it breaks. Philip the Fair was broke. The crown was drowning in debt, and the Templars were not just the creditors. They were the only organization in Europe with enough liquid wealth to save him. But kings do not like to beg. They prefer to take. On Friday, the 13th of October, in the year 1307, royal officers across France moved at dawn, carrying sealed arrest warrants that had been prepared in total secrecy. Every Templar in the kingdom was seized at once. They had no time to burn their records, no time to warn their brothers, no time to even understand what was happening as the doors came down. The timing was everything. The arrests were coordinated to the hour, so no warning could travel. The oaths that held the order together, the obedience, the brotherhood, the silence, became the instruments of its destruction. A man who has built his life on trusting his brothers cannot imagine until too late that a king would break every rule of the world to destroy him. The preceptories fell one by one. The vaults were opened. The dust-covered ledgers were carried away. And in them, Philip found something better than gold. The paper trail of an order that had become too central to the economy of Europe to be allowed to survive independently. And the torture began. Men who had spent decades in disciplined service, who had never once betrayed a brother, were broken on the rack. They confessed to things they had never done, spitting on the cross, denying Christ, worshipping idols. The confessions were written down, signed, and used as ammunition. The order that had built its power on impeccable trust was now being destroyed by forced lies. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, an old warrior who had led the order through its final desperate years, watched his life's work turn to ash. The climax is not a battle. There is no siege engine, no trebuchet hurling stones, no glory. The downfall of the Knights Templar is a bureaucratic massacre accomplished with warrants, chains, and forced testimony. The man who could not be defeated on a battlefield was erased in a series of cold, procedural steps. That is the true horror of the story. It did not need steel. It needed ink. The end came for Jacques de Molay in March of 1314. After years of imprisonment, he was brought out before the crowd, given one last chance to repeat his confession. Instead, the story goes, he shouted that the order was innocent, that the confessions had been lies torn from broken men. Whether he said the words or not, the outcome was the same. That evening, he was burned at the stake on a small island in the Seine, watching the flames climb. His final act, a refusal to let the lie stand unchallenged. Philip the Fair got what he wanted. The Templar treasury passed into the crown's hands. The debts were effectively erased with the creditor, but the king did not live long to enjoy it. Within the same year, both Philip and the Pope, who had been pressured into suppressing the order, were dead, and the legend began to grow in the space where the truth used to be. The order that could not survive as an institution now refused to die as an idea. Every conspiracy theory, every story of hidden treasure, every secret society claiming lineage to the Templars, all of it grew from that burning pyre. So let us close the loops, because you have earned the real picture. The first loop asked how 9 poor knights became a transnational superpower. The answer is trust converted into capital. They protected the vulnerable, kept their word, built a reputation for absolute reliability, and then monetized that reputation into the first international banking system. They did not need magic. They needed consistency, discipline, and a papal exemption that placed them above every king in Europe. That was the secret rise. No grail, no occult knowledge, just an oath kept so faithfully that the entire continent learned to bet on it. The second loop asked what hidden weakness allowed a coordinated purge to destroy an untouchable order. The answer is that their very centralization was the fatal flaw. Every fortress, every ledger, every brother answered to a single command structure. When a king discovered he could seize the entire network in one coordinated dawn, the strength that had made the Templars powerful, their unity, became the instrument of their annihilation. One order, one king, one morning, and nearly 2 centuries of power dissolved into smoke. That is the story the pop culture myth hides. No sacred relic, no secret bloodline, no underground vault under a chapel. Instead, a patient, unglamorous accumulation of trust and gold, and then a cold political execution disguised as a heresy trial. The Templars were not the villains of some ancient mystery. They were the first casualty of a very modern truth, that the more powerful you become, the more dangerous your enemies become, and the more alone you are when the dawn comes for you. You just watch the most powerful military order in medieval Europe get erased in one coordinated morning, not by a secret relic or a heresy, but by the same centralized machinery that had made them untouchable. If you want to keep tracing how that machinery never really died, subscribe and stay with the rest of this investigation as it moves from 1307 to the present day. Comment the word ledger if you see the same pattern every time a modern institution goes quiet about its books. Because the real war was never fought with swords alone, and you now know exactly where it was fought instead. If you are the kind of person who watches the news and wonders who really holds the debt, who really moves the money, who really decides what the public is allowed to believe, you have just seen the medieval origin story of that machinery. The true students of the blade know that the sword is only the public face. The real war is fought in ledgers, loans, and sealed warrants. It was true in 1307. It is still true every time a powerful institution goes quiet about its books. So the next time you see a white-mantled knight in a video game, do not ask what treasure he guards. Ask what he owes. Ask who profits from his silence. Ask what happens when one man decides the debt is too heavy and the creditor must be erased. The Templars learned the answer on a river island in Paris, with the smoke rising and the crowd watching and the old Grand Master refusing to let the lie have the final word. That refusal, that single act of defiance at the end of a life of discipline, is the only treasure worth remembering. And when the flames finally died down and the crowds drifted home, something strange settled over Europe. The order was gone, but the questions it left behind refused to be buried. Why had the king moved so fast? Why had the Pope agreed so quickly? Why had the confessions all sounded so alike, so rehearsed, so convenient? The more the official story insisted on heresy, the more reasonable people wondered if they were being handed a script rather than a truth. That doubt did not fade. It hardened into legend. The burning of Jacques de Molay did not end the story. It began the afterlife of the Templars. Within a generation, the survivors scattered into other orders, other kingdoms, other lives. Some joined rival military orders and kept fighting. Others slipped into obscurity, carrying their skills and their secrets into quiet retirement. But the idea of the Templars, the disciplined brotherhood, the hidden vault, the oath that outlived death, proved harder to kill than the men who had worn the white mantle. You can see their ghost in every secret society that ever claimed a hidden lineage. You can see their shadow in every borderless financial institution that answers to no single flag. You can see their warning in every powerful organization that believes its own indispensability will protect it. The Templars thought their wealth and their service made them untouchable. They were wrong, and the men who erased them learned a lesson of their own, that destroying a legend is much harder than destroying an institution. The truth burned. The question stayed. So, here is the real legacy, stripped of mystery and magic. The Templars showed the world that faith, discipline, and trust could be converted into something harder than steel, into capital, into influence, into the quiet machinery that moves armies and topples kings. And they showed that same world how quickly all of it could be taken away by a man with a warrant, a grudge, and no intention of ever repaying what he owed. That is the complete story. That is the secret rise and the sudden downfall. The white mantle still hangs in our imaginations, but now you know what it actually covered. Not a holy relic, not a forbidden truth, but a fragile empire built on oaths and gold, destroyed by the very trust that made it great. 9 men made a vow in a ruined city. An empire rose from that vow, and a king, drowning in his own debt, decided that the only way to be free of the creditor was to burn the record itself. He succeeded, and in succeeding, he made the Templars immortal. Because nothing survives quite like a truth that was never allowed to speak clearly.